Welcome back, dudes and dudettes, to another episode of Just a Dude Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, here to talk about the stuff that really matters to you and me. Today, we're diving into the world of politics, but don't worry, we're keeping it real, keeping it relatable, and most importantly, keeping it just dude. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, because we're about to get into some serious dude talk. All right, let's get this party started. Today, I've got a special guest who's not just navigating the crazy maze of politics, but doing it with a unique perspective. Blake Fischer, the man behind The Homeless Conservative, is here to share his thoughts on conservatism, the media landscape, and what it means to be politically homeless in today's world. Blake, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for bringing your brand of real talk to Just a Dude. Blake, welcome to the show. You want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Blake Fischer. About a year and a half ago, started a political podcast because I guess I felt like that would be fun. And it's called The Homeless Conservative. And I'm still playing around with what that is right now. I've started the last couple of weeks doing like a daily thing on YouTube, which is a lot of work, but it's been fun. So yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure out like what exactly to do. But the main idea, the reason it's called The Homeless Conservative is that I've been a conservative my whole life. I've been more into politics than most normal people would be. My uncle ran for mayor of Oklahoma City when I was in like 8th grade. So I paid it's like you start helping with the campaign and stuff. Most 8th graders aren't paying attention to politics. And so I've always liked it and enjoyed it, but I just felt like of the last 10 years specifically, the Republican Party has kind of strayed from a lot of the things that I thought we had settled on as these were the pillars of conservatism.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of those things have just kind of gone by the wayside, especially it was partially in the wake of Mitt Romney's loss in 2012 that they sort of were searching, much like the Democrats are searching now. And then Donald Trump comes along and just totally reshapes the party to his vision, which is frankly not conservatives. It's not like people are, it's hilarious because it doesn't matter who I talk bad about on my YouTube channel or podcast. Everyone accuses me of being paid for by the other side. It doesn't matter. So if I'm talking crap on Biden, you're a Trump guy. And if I'm talking about on Trump, it's you got Trump derangement syndrome and you're getting paid by the Democrats. I'm like, I promise you, the Democrats are not paying me. That'd be fantastic if someone was. But
Exactly.
So I basically just feel like politicians they're beholden to us. Like they work for us. And I'm going to call the good and the bad, no matter what the letter is after someone's name. It doesn't matter. And I'm just not loyal to any politician. I'm going to call them out when they do things I like. I'm going to call them out when they do things I don't like. And I think that's basically the job. But for whatever reason over the last, really Barack Obama started it. I feel like not he started it, but his sort of cult-like crowd of you can say nothing, like he is perfect. You can say nothing bad about him. And I think he started it, and then Donald Trump just took that to a different level. And
he almost took it to the opposite level, right? Like he could do nothing wrong, but Donald Trump does everything wrong. It doesn't matter what he does.
Well, so now with Donald Trump, you've got the weirdest thing is that it was a little bit like that with Obama. You had some people that sort of had what we didn't call at the time, but what you would call now, I guess, Obama derangement syndrome, where like everything he did was a 5-alarm fire, which was ridiculous. And I think it really hurt the Republican Party because it made them seem unserious. They were complaining about things that were things that they did when they were in power, or then did again once they got in power, or even just we know they didn't really care about. They just had to make a stink of stuff. And part of that is just being out of power. That's how it works. But then Donald Trump took it to a whole another level of, it seems like people are, the question I get the most is, do you support Donald Trump? I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? If he does the thing I like, I'm going to say yes. Like,
exactly.
I like that thing he did. If he does something I don't like, I'm going to say no, I don't like that thing. I just don't believe in this blind loyalty, but it does feel like Trump really set the bar for, you have to be 100% loyal to him and defend him at all costs, no matter what, or you've got to be 100% against him. And those are the two sides that you can be on. And I was just like, I don't want to do that. I have no desire. It does make it harder to have a political show because most people are into the outrage and they're into the fear mongering. That the algorithm absolutely rewards that kind of behavior.
It sure does.
And, so I'm taking the slower path and I'm okay with that. I think there are people like me in the country because the stat I point to is that 1 million people showed up and voted for Nikki Haley in the Republican primary after Donald Trump had already had enough votes to win the primary, which means 1 million people in the country left their houses to go vote in a meaningless primary election. And I go, it's not that I'm like, Nikki Haley's, I would have preferred her to win the Republican primary for sure over Donald Trump, but it's not so much about Nikki Haley supporters. It's that there are clearly that many people that said, I'm conservative, but I don't like this direction that we're going. And so I'm going to at least put a line in the sand that says, nope, I'm at least one of the people that said, it's not going to be because of me that this goes down in flames.
Yeah.
And
Exactly, and
so
think about how powerful that is to leave your house fully well knowing that your vote is really not gonna make a difference,
at
but
all, I mean, like, the
you're
other guy
still
has it
making
sewed
a
up, yeah.
yeah, you're still making a statement saying, "Listen, I still support conservative values, but not in from this guy
Yeah.
over here," right? Or
Yeah.
whoever it may have been.
Yeah, so I think I talk to people, that either are, friends that listen to it, or I talk to just listeners and stuff sometimes, and just to pick their brain about, "Hey, what do you like? What do you not like?" Because I'm still trying to figure it out. And, that's the story I typically hear is, yeah, I basically checked out of politics because it got so gross and I didn't wanna have to pick a side, and that's why you're also seeing a ton of people become independents. We had
Yes.
more independents voted in this last election than Democrats. So, you know, that's a problem for the parties, I think, that clearly people don't like either one of them. I mean, we're
Yeah.
ping-ponging back and forth. We've gone Democrat, Republican for 4 not just presidential elections, but the Congress all changed
Yeah,
too, every
yep.
2 years, essentially.
Every 2 years, it's changing.
It's pretty clear that people are rejecting the party in power and going, let's give the other guys a try and let's see if they can figure it out this time. And then they don't do it right and they reject them. And it's pretty clear that if someone just got in there and did the job that Americans actually asked them to do, I think they'd have wild success. But
Absolutely.
everyone goes too far and tries to do a bunch of stuff that no one asked them to do, and I think it's just a bad cycle.
Yeah, and Blake, one of the things that I talk to a lot of my guests about when we do get into politics, which doesn't always happen, usually on my news show on Friday, there's a little bit of politics in there. I'll say if I like something that Trump did, but I'm the type of person, and I think a lot of people really, I don't have any to back this up as far as statistics, but I remember growing up when, even though we were in a two-party system, it seemed that we could agree to disagree on, big issues that maybe we weren't going to come together on, but we could still get together regardless of Democrat, Republican, Independent, and get stuff done. And I'm thinking back for myself, that'd be like in the 90s, what I really remember, the Clinton era, the Bush era, but we were still getting stuff done in Congress. And it seems like you said, when Obama came into office, maybe not his first term, but definitely his second term, it seemed like we went to hey, let's see if we can find common ground and work together, to you're either with me or you're against me.
Yeah, and I think some of that was just I don't think Barack Obama, it's weird. Barack Obama's a weird character
Yeah.
because I think that he's incredibly talented as far as like doing a speech or in front of a crowd and things like that.
He got me the first election. I'm telling you, he did. He said some things that, made me go and say, you know what, these are things that I can get behind. And then after 4 years of not delivering, I said, okay, never again.
Right,
you
but
know?
I think that was the problem. He wasn't very good at the actual politicking of like working with Congress. I mean, honestly, he owes a lot. He owes everything he did accomplish to Joe Biden really knowing how to work the Senate. I mean,
Yeah.
being that and Joe Biden's not a particularly talented politician either. It's just that Barack
He's been
Obama had
there
only
forever.
been there
Yeah.
for so I mean to put it in perspective, the thing that always shocked me was that same uncle that was mayor in Oklahoma City. He ran for Senate in 2004 when Barack Obama won. So I was like, it's kind of crazy that like a couple. I'm going like this guy's not even been a senator for 4 years.
Yeah.
And of course, then we elect Donald Trump that's not been anything for any amount of
Nothing
time.
at all. Right.
And I'm not saying you have to have prior experience, but I do think that jumping into the executive branch specifically, which is why I think governors make better presidents generally, is because they've done that job at a small level
Smaller level.
before.
Yep.
And whereas like even being a senator doesn't necessarily translate right because it's just not the same job. And it's not, I just don't think Barack Obama had zero foreign policy experience. And I think it really showed. I think he was absolutely terrible at foreign policy. I don't think actually that gets talked about enough other than in conservative circles about how bad his foreign policy really screwed up even today, what we're dealing with like Russia and Ukraine,
Yep.
and so he's a weird character because but people loved
He
him.
was very charismatic and just
Yes.
a likable guy.
And I just don't think he was very good at the politicking part. He kind of thought, well, I'm really popular, so you should just hop on board. And senators and congressmen at the time were still like, no, we have some control here. Now, they've completely abdicated that now. That is all gone. Congress
Yeah.
is not interested in actually doing their job at all, it appears.
No.
And that's a new development that certainly been happening over the last couple decades, but it's escalated extremely under Donald Trump. I mean, Congress has done absolutely nothing other than pass the stopgap bill for last year's budget, for the budget that started in October of last
Yeah.
year. That's
Yeah,
all
just-
they've done so
just
far.
to patch it till they could get a bigger budget. And You're absolutely right. And I think as a conservative, and I say conservative myself because I don't want to say that I'm particular to a party. I'm going to vote what best, reflects my values and my thoughts. And that could be a Democrat. And I'm saying probably not today. It wouldn't be a Democrat, but it's, Democrats of the past, I could identify with them very much so. They seem to be a party for the working people. They seem to value the middle class. And it seems like that party has just gone way off the rails and gone so totally left that they forgot about everybody in the middle.
It's also weird to me that essentially, I mean, you talked about Bill Clinton. I mean, Donald Trump ran a campaign like Clinton. I mean, it was if I wrote out all the policy things on paper, you wouldn't be able to pick who was who. Most people wouldn't be able to pick
you're
who was
right.
who. And it's just funny that Republicans now think that Donald Trump is this ultimate like alpha conservative kind of thing. And I'm like, well, he's a lot like Bill Clinton, who you guys were absolutely crapping on in the 90s. So which one is it? Was Bill Clinton a good president? I mean, I actually think Bill Clinton was very good at the politicking. He was much better at it than maybe anyone in my lifetime, other than Ronald Reagan, who I'll count. But I was, 6 when he, or 4 when he left office or something.
You and me both. Yeah.
So I was young. I don't remember that, but Clinton I remember because I was a kid in the 90s, and it's interesting. He was really good at the politicking part in the sense that what Clinton did really well, that no one has done since very well. And is he saw that 70% of the country wanted a balanced budget or whatever it was, and he went that way. He said, I'm going to do the thing that's popular so that I can get reelected. And picking things that were like 70-30 issues. And I know everyone thinks we don't have 70-30 issues now.
We do.
But it's absolutely not true. We have 80-20 issues. We have 70-30 issues. And one of the more interesting interviews I listened to several years ago, Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska, when he was in the Senate, he was on a podcast, and I heard him talking about like, hey, when I got to Washington, I just wanted to meet with everyone I could. And basically like, hey, what should I know about And as he was going around to all these different, people at the White House, and this is when Obama is in the White House and stuff, and he's talking to them, and they're like, oh yeah, I mean, senators and congressmen are coming to us all the time asking us to do stuff via executive order. And we're like, you guys can pass laws, right? That's in your job description. And they're like, well, yeah, we don't want to deal with the 30% of people that would be mad about it. So like even on 70-30 issues, they had that 30% is so loud. And I think that's still my theory, is that it's not, and it's backed up by who shows up in the primaries, in the Democratic and Republican primaries. It is like, okay, I think 2016 is the last time we had an open primary. And I think the numbers on that, don't totally quote me on this, I think it was 28% of eligible voters voted in the primary. So it's like 14 and 14% of each party. So then when you look at Donald Trump, he got like a plurality of those votes. He got like 42% of the Republican primary. So he got 42% of 14% of voters. So he got like 6% of the country. And then that's how we pick the two people we have to pick. Now that's our fault we could get into the weeds on some of this. I'm sort of anti-primary system. I think that it's been a bad experiment and we should change it, because that's what we're getting. We're getting worse and worse candidates because fewer and fewer people are participating in those primaries.
Well,
and we get and then we get to November and you're like, everyone says, I hate both of these people and I'm going to pick the lesser of two evils.
That's been our election choices since as long as I can remember, probably since, I would say Obama's second term is always like, okay, it's the lesser of two evils. Who are we going to go for? I've never in my lifetime had a person that I sat there, who knows, maybe it would have been Reagan if I was old enough, but to sit there and say, this is the guy that's going to just really correct America and put us on the right track. And quite frankly, not one person can do that anyway. We all got to work together.
That's the biggest problem. And that's the thing that is anti-conservative about Donald Trump, in my opinion, is that he thinks he can fix everything. And to me, being a conservative means, okay, well, what are you trying to conserve? For me, that's the Constitution. And the Constitution was very clearly set up for the president to not be the most powerful person in the country. Congress is the powerful body. And I know people love to argue that they're co-equal, but I don't find any evidence for that, because I look at the Second Amendment, I look at the first Article 1, and it gives Congress all the powers. They have the power of the purse. They have the power to declare war. They have the power to tariff. They have all these powers that they have delegated to the executive branch for God knows why. And so, it doesn't make any sense to me that obviously the founding fathers had no idea that Congress would give up power. They were trying to write this whole document because they were worried about people seeking power, and they were trying to have checks and balances against it. They had no idea that Congress would be like, sure, let's give it to the executive branch so that we just run for re-election and basically have safe seats, and we'd rather be on TV anyway. It just doesn't.
Exactly.
It's like,
It has
So
definitely changed in the last, I would even say, just the last 40 years, how politicians do things. Everything's filmed now. Even if you think about when you were a kid and when I was a kid, the only time you saw a politician is if your parents watched the news at night.
right.
Now they're in
Yeah.
your face all the time.
Well, and an interesting theory about that I never thought of. I think I heard this first from Jonah Goldberg. Don't totally quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure someone, but I think maybe Yuval Levin has talked about it too. But one of the big problems they point back to is C-SPAN and the fact that all of a sudden we had cameras in Congress all the time.
And it was like 24-hour-a-day coverage, yeah.
So what it makes it is that unless you are on one of the committees that can't have cameras, like Intel or National Security, one of those kind of things, you've got cameras on you all the time, and you can't compromise. You can't, ask the hard question of the person in your party. Beyond that, so that was already starting to be a problem. Then you get small dollar donations being the primary driver of elections, where
Mhm.
you need to get 5, 10, 20 to $100 donations from millions of people, as opposed to, used to go to maybe thousands of
Yep,
fat cats.
yep.
And so what drives those people? Well, it's outrage. And so I don't know if you've watched any like Senate committee hearings lately. You'll see multiple senators from the same party asking the same questions that
Mhm.
someone else already asked.
Yeah,
And
and it's
you're
like,
like, why are
why?
they doing that? It's because they need their clip that they can send out for fundraising.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so it's like they have a script that says, this is how you get on TV, this is how you get on the talk shows, and this is how you fundraise. And that is their script. They don't care that their fellow Democrat asked the exact same question of the
Yeah.
same person 5 minutes before. They've got to get their version asking that so that they can send a fundraising email. So I agree. The cameras have become a huge problem in the sense that I would like to go back a little bit to smoke-filled rooms. I feel like we could get stuff done. I'm not saying I want accountability, not transparency, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense because those are two different things. Transparency is letting you see everything that goes on, and right now we're getting that transparency by seeing that they're doing nothing. Whereas I'd rather not have the transparency and have the accountability and actually see things go through. I mean, look, I realize that President Trump's only been in office and we've only had a Republican House and Senate now for, since January 20th. And at the time of this recording, it's been about 2 months, right? Give or take. So, but, you don't expect the world to change in 2 months, but you expect a few laws to be passed. And I mean, really, I think we've only had two major bills. One was the Lake and Riley Act, and the other one was, yeah, like you said, the stopgap measure for the spending
Yeah.
bill.
And look, I would like be willing to bet. I know we're recording this in March, but I'd be willing to bet they won't pass anything by June. Substantial.
I bet you
I mean, like,
they won't either. And
I
that's
just
the
think
thing.
that
It's like, and they're sitting there and they're just waiting. It seems like Congress is just waiting for President Trump to sign a new executive order to do something. And then the left's going to complain about it and the right's going to praise it. But no one's going to get in there and do anything to actually either, stop it by making a new law or enforce it by making a new law.
And the really frustrating thing about that for me, and should be for everyone in the country, is that if you care about those policies, they're going to get undone if a Democrat gets elected in 2028. So everything that Trump, like, people are like, well, don't you like this? I'm like, well, sure, except that someone can just undo it. If you just sign an executive order to close the border, the next Joe Biden can come in there and open it back up again, and we've got the same problem. And that's why I'm like, I would have had a immigration bill on my desk on day one.
Absolutely.
He could have the Republicans in Congress will do anything right now that he asks. Anything.
Yeah.
I mean, to a degree that it infuriates me, actually.
Yeah, because I think they believe he has a mandate, which, he has a mandate of the voters that showed up. Let me put it that way. Not a mandate of Americans.
But I mean,
And
mandate, what does that mean? Like, he got 1.5% more of the vote than the other person? That's not crazy.
If you think about it from our conservative friends, they think this is a huge election because it's one of the first times in 40 years or 20 years that the Republicans won the popular vote, plus all the swing states, plus, or the majority of the swing states. And I think that's why they're saying it's, but again, I always say it was just a majority of the voters that voted for him, not the majority of Americans. And I think people get that mixed up. Only having 4 million votes out of 300 and something million people, that's not a lot.
Well, and even then, I mean, like, Donald Trump is pretending he won it was like the 43rd largest election out of 47 that we've had. It was not that, it wasn't a great victory. I mean, it was impressive. Like, he made a lot of gains. Like, credit. You want,
I mean,
you're not
compared to
less
what
of
the
the
media
president.
was telling us, right? The
Exactly.
media told us that there's no way he's going to win it. I mean, the whole time, even when they switched and inserted a political candidate, which I'm sure we could talk about that for hours on the left, but they did this, and and he won big in that era, but it's again, it's still very minor majority of.
Reagan won 49 states
Yes.
in 84. That is a
That
mandate.
is a mandate.
That's a mandate.
Absolutely.
That is a we approve of what you did in your first term, like overwhelming. Maybe mandate's not the right word. I don't love the word mandate, but I do like to say that, like, if you're running for a second term and you get 49 states, people it's a job
like what
interview.
You're doing. Yeah.
It's
what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a simultaneous job interview and job sort of, what do you do? I've not been in corporate world for a while. Like a quarterly review.
Yeah, like
it's
a review.
That.
Yeah.
We're basically simultaneously reviewing and possibly firing you and hiring the next guy at the exact same time. That's really all voting is. And
it is.
When you win 1.5% of the vote and, a just normal electoral college vote, I'm not that impressed by it. Although my complaint, my soapbox that I love to get on is that I hate talking about the popular vote because it just doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all.
It's like talking about which team had more yards in a football game. It's like we don't measure the game
matter
that
if you
way.
lose.
Doesn't it? And it's not how it works. And so no one campaigns to win the popular vote.
No,
people are campaigning to win the electoral college because that's what wins. And I know people don't like it; they think it's unfair. But like, it's just it doesn't make. I'm like, no, this is the purpose of this.
It's absolutely, we see it because if not, California and New York City, Los Angeles and New York City would run the country.
And no one would ever go to a small state again. Like, you don't need it. And so, and the point of federalism and the point of the Constitution was like, okay, we're going to give some vote to the popular. So if you have more people in your state, you get more people in the House. But we're going to give every state, because they're equal, to senators. And people hate that for some reason. They think it's unfair.
I don't know why.
And I go, it's not about being equally represented in the Senate. It's about your state being equally represented with every other state. The House is where we do the popularity thing. We say if California has more people, they get more voters and or they get more House members. And you explain this to people and they go, I feel like their eyes glaze over because I'm boring about it. But it is like, it's not the same thing.
How many people have actually sat down and read the Constitution?
I mean, when 50% of the country can't name the three branches of the government. So I promise you it's at least 50% that have not even ever learned anything about it, maybe.
Yeah. And it's, all the rules and everything is in there, and it totally makes sense, especially, I don't believe that our founding fathers actually thought that we would be a two-party system. I think they thought it would be, more of like a popular based, because if you read in I think it's in Article 2 that talks about the election of the president or 3.
Yeah. Because they used to split them.
Yeah. They used to split it because it was, you would vote for whoever got the most vote out of all the states, right? Regardless of who it was. You could have a president that was a Republican and a, Democrat that was a vice president that was a Democrat or a Whig party or whatever at the time.
Can you imagine that happening now? Can you imagine and by the way, it can still happen if there's an electoral college tie. And then the House gets to pick one. Yeah. And so
that blows my mind, because think of if you like right now, it'd be great if it happened because you got a conservative House, conservative, Senate. But what people don't realize is, say you have a, Democratic, or a leftist House and a conservative Senate, and there's a tie in the electoral college. That means the House gets to pick I believe it's the president, right?
Yep.
And then the Senate gets to pick the vice president. So generally that could be from two different parties. I don't think we've seen that yet, but it could happen.
No, but what's interesting about that is it probably would split, because if you have an evenly divided electoral college, it's probably not, one party's probably not winning both the House and the Senate, unless the map just worked out really perfect for him that year.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was kind of rooting for that this year, honestly. I was like, that would actually
I thought it would be cool.
Mostly because it's like, let's just make it total chaos. Let's just make it real crazy. Like if we're embracing the chaos, let's do it at least in a fun way. But it would be also pretty fun to see Trump and Walz running the White House together,
or vice versa, the two VPs,
or Kamala, JD. So it's one of those things where I think that if we did, you're right. I don't think they thought we were going to only have two parties being so dominant, and I still think that What's weird about that is that there've always been two parties, but they weren't the same two parties, except since the Civil War, since Lincoln, essentially, it's been
Lincoln,
Republicans and
yep.
Democrats. Although the parties evolve so much that they're not the same. Like, you can't even compare the Republican Party to the Republican Party that it was 25 years ago, and the same with the Democratic Party. They change so much all the time. And like I said, most of Donald Trump's positions that now the MAGA world have fully embraced were Democratic positions 10 years ago.
Absolutely. If
We
you
were
listen
the
to
party
a
of free
speech,
trade.
yeah, if you listen to a speech of Trump today talking about, tariffs or the border or,
Unions.
free trade, unions, and go listen to Bill Clinton, you
The
would
same.
swear it was the same speech.
It's the same speech. And that's why he donated to both Clintons.
Yeah.
I mean, he
Well,
was a Democrat.
for the longest
Yeah.
time.
So he's a Democrat. I mean, he's just like, Donald Trump has taken the Republican Party to where the Democratic Party was in the 90s. That's essentially what the party is. So we have a Democratic Party that is, people think that I hate when, first of all, I don't love the left-right thing, because it's not really a single plane like that. It is much more complicated than that. But that's what we have, and that's what we refer to. But it does drive me crazy that people are like far right, far right, far right. When talking about Donald Trump, sometimes I go, no. Like,
Yeah.
I'm further right than him if you look at the tradition of conservatism, but he's more authoritarian, but so are the Democrats.
Yes.
There's like left and right authoritarianism. So I don't think left and right is the right way to think about stuff. I think about sort of authoritarian technocrat, like the sort of government can do big things and do them well, which Donald Trump believes and Joe Biden believes. I think there's less daylight between Joe Biden and Donald Trump than people think. They both think they're the only people that can solve a problem. They're both really stubborn. They're both really, let's say, intellectually, I feel like they feel intellectually inferior, whether they are or not. I would argue they both are most of the time, but then they make up for that by being a bully. I mean, there's so many things that are the same about them, and even a lot of the policies. I mean, Biden just kept the same Trump tariffs that I was against in his first term, just kept all of them. Yep. And so you've got two pro-tariff parties, essentially. You've got two it's like, we just want my people running the government and we'll do it well. Yes. They're not really trying to make, Donald Trump doesn't have any interest in making government smaller, really. He just wants them to be in control of it and not Democrats. Well, you're just setting yourself up for whiplash every 4 years when you do that.
It's definitely going to suck if they don't, if Congress doesn't bite down on it and write some laws that actually put, whatever cuts or, the Doges. And I know we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but, these cuts that they're trying to save money, that's, they shouldn't be done. I mean, it's great that we're going out there and looking for overspending in areas that maybe we wouldn't spend in and putting that money back towards the debt. But the fact of the matter is that should be Congress's job. I mean, that's Absolutely, the whole point of oversight committees,
Yep. Yeah, it's entirely Congress's job. And again, that will be interesting to see how that plays out, because I frankly don't think, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about Doge, but yeah, I don't think that is not traditionally a conservative way of thinking about how to run the country. And so it's just funny when we use the left-right thing, because I go, to me, when people go, are you a strong conservative? I'm like, well, what does that mean anymore? Because some people think conservative means what Donald Trump is. I'm like, that's not how I define it. So I'm almost like, we almost need a whole new batch of words for describing the sort of progressive and liberal, or, sort of traditional Reagan-y Democrats and 90s or not Reagan, there were Reagan Democrats too, actually. So that's kind of interesting too, because that's really where neoconservative came from too. That was Democrats that left the Democratic Party during Reagan, and they were the neoconservatives, because they were like, okay, this is getting a little crazy with all your, just like obsession with protest Democrats that kind of became their thing in the 60s and 70s. But now it's this like neocon means you're a warmonger, which is weird. I'm like, we already had a word for that. Why are we adopting the other word? So we need new words. Let's sit down and let's actually define all these, so that when I say liberal, people know I mean like classically liberal. I don't know. It's hard to do.
It is hard to do. And you know what? It's funny, because that's going to kind of take us into our main first segment, I guess, is to explore what conservative values mean in today's context. What do you think, Blake, that they mean?
Well, I sort of mentioned, I think that if the word conservatism, it actually means like you've got to conserve something. So it does mean something different in America than it means in other places, because some other places could be trying, if you're conservative in England, it might mean you want a monarchy, because they used to have a monarchy, but we never had one. So I'm saying, I think the founders were incredibly wise and had a lot of foresight in the way they wrote the Constitution, so that it could be adapted and it could be like that. They weren't so specific in a lot of parts, because they knew technology was going to change. Like if they would have said ships everywhere instead of transportation, well, then what happens when trains and steamboats and all these
Exactly.
other things come along? Well, they were wise in the way they wrote it, even though some of it is like, you could have been a little clearer on a few of these amendments, put a
Mhm.
comma in the right place so we don't go
Right.
because I think the Second Amendment, I think it's fair for some people to say it's written a little sloppily. It's not a great sentence,
Yeah.
that sentence. And I would love if I could go back in time, I'd be like, hey guys, just be a little clearer on a couple of these things in here. Okay.
Yeah.
And, but I think for the most part,
Yeah, can you just say, "Can people own firearms?"
right.
And,
Yes.
can they own any of them?
Yeah. Can they
Right?
own any kind of firearms that, because I just like be a little more specific because the technology is going to change. People are going to change. But really, for the most part, I don't think they made any, like, I want to say mistakes. I mean, I know everyone's big problem, especially with conservatives and Republicans, is that we, Democrats over the last like 10 years, I would say the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has decided that all of that is garbage. They've just
Mhm.
decided that that because any of them owned slaves and because slavery was allowed at the time, they're all garbage. We got to start over from scratch. And I go, no, 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 no. They
Nope.
were flawed. I mean, I think Malcolm Gladwell has a great thing where he says history is like layers. You have like the first layer is like this happened, there it is. Like this happened because of blah blah blah. And then it's like layer number 2. These are human beings. They are complicated. I think he said, it's
Mhm.
like you can go down to all these different layers and really get into the minutia. And you should, if you're learning history well, never be like that guy is 100% right all the time. Just like you shouldn't do that right now with politicians. And I think when people learn
Absolutely.
history, even someone like Lincoln, who people would regard as one of the best presidents we've ever had for sure,
Mhm.
he still did stuff that I would disagree with. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's okay to say.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the problem is like the far left decided all that's garbage. And I think that that's been all of the problem with our politics for my lifetime has been we've slowly strayed from that. So Congress has strayed from Article 1 and them having all the
Mhm.
power and keeping the president in check. The people have strayed from being a responsible citizenry with, values and the same sharing the same moral. It's like you don't
Yep.
have to be. That's the problem is that, I'm a Christian, unapologetically so, but I don't like the sort of Christian nationalism that's taken over the Republican Party in the sense that like sometimes they talk about things like that is first of all I just think God's bigger than that than
Yeah,
politics, and so like yeah,
absolutely.
he doesn't need your help. But then secondly, I go I'm firmly into like I think this country was clearly founded on those people had a short memory of what happened when the church and state were really
Absolutely.
intertwined the way they were in England, and we had a whole Protestant Reformation because of it, and so that's the kind of thing I go, no, but I understand what they were trying to do, and they were trying to say that, we don't want those two things intertwined, and I'm fine with that. Now, I think we've taken it
Yes.
too far. I think we've tried to say that you can't have any religion in any kind of state thing whatsoever, and I think that's ridiculous. I think
It
that
is.
there's nothing
I
about
think
that in the Constitution.
Yeah, the separation of church and state was meant like, the state would take care of the needs of, like protection of the country and things like that. And the church would take care of the needs of the people, meaning that because everybody belonged at that time mostly to a church, so they took care of their own. And
Well,
that's where that separation really was, if you
when
think
some of
about
those
it.
and in some of those places, like in England, I mean, it was purely, I mean, it was power on both of the sides, but it
Yeah,
was, or
from
even how the church,
England's side for
yeah,
sure.
or
Definitely, because the church essentially ruled the country.
exactly. And so I don't want that. Like I don't think
No,
I don't think that's right, and I don't want that. But I also don't. I think we've taken it too far sometimes, where we say
by
like, "Oh, you can't
just
be a
trying to
teacher and say a prayer."
yeah.
That's ridiculous. No one's, that's just ridiculous. I think, and I don't think there's any constitutional.
And that comes to people just getting offended, and I don't
Yes.
know when, me getting offended became your problem.
Yeah.
You
Well, and
know,
also it's
that's
just,
a me problem. That's not a you problem.
and it's also
You
not.
know,
That's not what none of the Bill of Rights protects you from being offended. None of
no,
it.
none of it.
And that's actually the point of it is that
I
you
mean, that's
should
the
be
whole
offended.
and the reason we have the First Amendment is to protect that speech that does offend you, because that is
Exactly.
most often the speech that is most important.
Yeah. And so
I don't
I
want to
look
say
at
all the time, but yeah, but
no,
it
but it is.
definitely is.
It needs to be there. Like you need to be able to have the dissent against the people that are in power at the time. And I'm like Mr. like very First Amendment in the sense that, yeah, I think everyone should, I mean, I don't even think we should have, I think we should, well, I won't get into that. That's too complicated. I was just gonna say like some of the stuff even I think was appropriate during the Civil Rights Act, but I think is not anymore because we
Mhm.
don't have widespread racism that like won't allow a black person to stay at any hotel in a state. Like
Exactly.
that just doesn't like there is racism for sure still, but
Absolutely.
there's these pockets of it and it's normally individuals. It's not the state being racist anymore.
Exactly.
Now, some people argue that they are. I don't buy
Yeah,
it.
they argue. What do they call it? Systemic racism.
Systemic
right?
racism, which I'm like, yeah. And some of that exists. I mean, some of that when it's
Yeah,
like
I won't say.
residual.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
won't say that it doesn't, but and I look at it from this way. I was a cop for 13 years, and I worked the road, and I worked predominantly in a lower class white neighborhood. But we used to get people saying, "Oh, what are you doing? Are you profiling people?" And it's like, listen, have you ever driven in a car at night with light shining on a window and try to see what somebody looks like inside of a car? That
yeah,
has nothing to do with it.
right. Yeah,
We're
yeah.
just out here doing a job. You made a traffic infraction, or we got a call about your car specifically.
Well,
When
and
your
that's the other
license
thing.
plate and car matches, I mean, hey,
That's the other thing. I think the thing that bothers me about the race stuff specifically is that I
Mhm.
know there's still racism,
Absolutely.
and
I won't deny it.
there's no doubt that but I don't think the way to fight it is to call everyone a racist that doesn't
Racist.
agree with you, because
Exactly.
studies have shown it turns people racist. If you call them racist all the time, eventually they'll just be like, well, I guess, I mean, I'll
I
embrace
might as
it,
well
I
be
guess.
what they call me, right?
Right. And so, my problem is that you talked about, you're patrolling mostly like a poor white neighborhood. There are as many poor white people as there are poor black people in this country.
Absolutely.
Now, as a percentage of the entire population, it doesn't work. Like, there are fewer percentage of white
Correct.
people that are poor than there are black people that are poor. But my point is that, why? What's the inner city kid that's black and the kid that's grown up in West Virginia, like JD Vance is a
Yeah.
good example of
Yep.
now I mean, I've heard some things that are like, he was a little more middle class than he made it out to be in his book or whatever. But either way, there's a
Yeah.
lot of people out there in Appalachia that are not. They're
No, not at all.
They're more, and honestly, they have less than a lot of the urban people because they don't have the resources that a city does a lot of times. There's a
Exactly.
lot of safety net stuff in places like Chicago and stuff that you do not have in the hills of West Virginia. And my point is, I would rather be sympathetic to that by class. I'm
Yeah.
not into this class warfare kind of stuff, but I
No,
am
not at
going
all. But yeah,
I do want to help people that are less fortunate than me, and that personally, and the government. Now, I don't want to be I'm not Bernie Sanders, where I just think that should be entirely the government's job, because I don't think the government can love people.
no,
I think
I don't think so either. I mean, I think that's up to us as people to do
Yes.
that. That's
Yep.
not up to the government.
And then that segues into the other thing about conservatism is not just preserving that Constitution, because I think that it was incredibly wise and that's why I preserved, but also the whole idea around the Constitution was men aren't perfect. And so
Yes.
I understand that people are flawed, and I assume everyone is flawed until proven otherwise. Well, I mean, I know everyone's flawed, but I assume
Everyone is, yep.
I assume everyone is power hungry. I assume everyone needs to be checked. I assume everyone is up to no good until proven otherwise when it comes to government, because I think that we should be skeptical about people in power. And that's why I go, Congress is not keeping a check on the president, and the president is doing wild things that he's not allowed to do. I'm concerned about how it will all play out because the Supreme Court's kind of the last branch standing in
Mhm.
Donald Trump's way.
Yeah.
And I think at some point I know they will tell him no, because people think that it's this 6-3 conservative court. You look at the votes and they're
Yeah, we've
all over
already
the
seen
place.
that it's not. Yeah.
All over the place over the last several years. People think, most of them are 9-0. First of all, most
Mhm.
court decisions are 7-2, 8-1, 9-0. Most of them aren't 5-4. Those are just the ones that get all the headlines. But
Exactly. The
even
really controversial ones.
Right.
Yeah.
But so it will, I think, happen that they'll say no to something and he might defy it. So far, he is not, and that's what's so funny about the hair on fire people is that they're like, blah, blah, blah. I think he's too
ruined
lazy.
the Constitution. He's gonna democracy's at stake and all this, and it's but he technically hasn't faced anything where he directly, from what I'm seeing power wise, like the Supreme Court saying, "Hey, you've got to hire these USAID people back." If they were to say that, I would hope to say that he would say, "Okay,
Yeah.
I have to."
No, I think they've been doing the normal legal stuff that everyone does. And the truth is, this is a thing in politics now. It is not unique to Donald Trump. Joe Biden did it more than anyone as far as signing executive orders that he knew were illegal. He did anyway. And then when the Supreme Court striked him down, they were like, the bad Supreme Court. They're
Exactly.
and
How
he got
bad
to
are
blame,
they?
even though
Yeah.
he knew the student loan stuff was all like that. It was all stuff.
Everybody told him. Even the media that tends to be more left sided, as we say, not conservative. Let's put it that way.
Definitely not.
They even knew that it was a long shot for the student loan stuff to go
It wasn't even a
off.
long shot. I mean, Nancy Pelosi got out that summer and
Yeah.
said the president can't do that. That Congress is the only body that can do that. And then
Yes.
a couple months later, Biden signs the thing anyway. He knows it's going to get struck down at the Supreme Court. He just has to have the win and the press conference and make the people on TikTok happy for a second.
Think about it. That got him a Democrat. That kept him in power as far as the House during the midterms.
See, I think that was more just Republicans just screwing it. I mean, I think
so?
that, yeah.
I thought that because I know a lot. He did that right around that midterm election and, said everybody's going to get their loans forgiven and everybody believed him. And then they voted Democrat. And I mean, that's just my opinion. I have no factual numbers.
Here's the numbers behind that where I don't buy it. That is buying out a constituency. It's no different than Trump bailing farmers out. It's actually zero different. It's just that what's really frustrating about it is that Donald Trump had to bail out the farmers because in his first term, he did a bunch of tariffs and China retaliated on soybeans. And so our farmers had no exports all of a sudden. So we had to bail them out because they were going to lose they were going to be poor and not have jobs. The difference is the college, the people student debt is 80, first of all, 2/3 of the country doesn't go to college. Okay. Yeah. So only a third of the country is going to college. And then out of that third, I think it was 79% of them had either paid back their loans fully or didn't have loans or whatever. So you're talking about 11% of the country. And when you look at the stats on college graduates, they are all paid more than the average person in the country. Most of them in that 11% of the country that had student loan debt, most of those are master's or doctorate degrees. They're not even bachelor's or associate's degrees. So you're talking about people literally that are lawyers and doctors, and they're getting paid six figures no matter where they are. In bigger cities, they're getting they're literally they're in the top 4% of the country across the board, basically, statistically. Those people have already moved to the Democrats anyway, especially look at college-educated women. They're already voting for Democrat no matter what. Now, it might have juiced turnout a little bit.
Yeah, but those people most likely wouldn't have even qualified for the loan forgiveness because it was based on income.
No, but it was not sort of. But the problem is they were going to forgive a certain amount no matter what. So
that's right. I did. Wasn't it like 10 grand or something from everybody? I think
it was more than that. So the point is,
I remember saying I still have student loan, and I remember saying, listen, I don't agree with this. I decided it was my logical decision that I was going to go to higher education. I was going to take these loans out. Now, I will talk about how, no one ever sat down with me when I took a loan and said, hey, by the way, this is what you're going to pay just for this loan per month when you graduate.
Exactly. And that's the problem.
My biggest problem is that they sit there and go, oh, yeah, but you don't have to, 6 months after you graduate when you have to start paying it back. And it won't be that much. But it's like, wait a second. If I go buy a car, if I go buy a house, anything that I finance, the first thing I want to know is how long is the term? How much am I going to be paying? How much interest will I pay overall? Right? Those are the three things that I want to know. And with student loans, they don't tell you any of that.
Right. And
at least when I was going through, they didn't.
Well, and there's an incestuous relationship between them too, as far as you have. Okay, so here's the triangle of just you go. Wait a minute, these people are not. You've got the Department of Education that's in charge of the loans, which is weird to me. Shouldn't be the Treasury or something that's in charge of the loans, right? It's a lot of money too. And so you got the Department of Education, who is not only in charge of the loans, but they're also tied to all the teachers unions, all the colleges, like they are all the Title IX stuff, all the so they're the regulators for the colleges that they are footing the bill for people to go to. And the colleges, the more people they accept and just anyone can get a loan, look at the college tuition rise over the last, since we were born, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's like, it goes higher than anything. Nothing is inflated more than college educations. Nothing more.
No, nothing.
It's only like that and medical
think
stuff.
About it. One generation from my parents to me, we're talking about probably $20,000 a year increase in college education on average is what I'm saying, and I can't even imagine what it's like for kids now that are going.
You're getting a worse product too, because not only is so I have a weird experience in that I went to college when I was 18 and then I was a musician and I started doing music all the time. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do both things. I'm just going to quit school. So I went to school for one semester and then 10 years later, after I did all the band stuff and it never worked out as well. I mean, I did it. I did more than a lot of people got to. So I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I'm not famous. Obviously, I was not making all the money being a musician. So I went back to school when I got married. And so I went as a 27-year-old back to school.
You sound like me. That's exactly how I did it.
Yeah. Okay. And so I was shocked at the difference in that not even 8 years, because I went to college at 19. So it was really, it was like 8 years that went by between that. There were several times that I turned in an assignment and no one else in my class turned it in. And the professor would be like, well, I must have miscommunicated. I'm like, you didn't. I
didn't.
heard it. And
Here it
am I
is.
getting some sort of extra credit? And that would just slide. They'd be like, well, you can turn it in. I guess we can do it next time.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They failed no one because they weren't allowed to fail anyone.
You
And
know
now
what?
the teachers, they
And
have
I'll
these
tell you,
reviews. It's crazy.
I had the same thing because I started college right out of high school, and I was 18 years old. I did like 2 semesters and I was working, and then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm making good money. So then I became a police officer, and I was like, you know what? I really don't need a college degree. Then Obama came in. I got laid off from being a cop in '09. I said, hey, maybe I do need a college degree, But yeah, I was the same way. I mean, from the time I went, I graduated high school in 2000. So I started college in 2000. And by the time I went back, I was almost probably about your age, like you said, 27, 28 years old when I went back. What a change, because like I was writing papers for group projects that we would do with people, and the work that these people, like even the ones that did do the work, it was really bad work.
Well, and now there's all these stories about people showing up to Ivy League schools sometimes and literally having to take remedial reading classes. They've never read a book.
Yeah.
Like
That's
they never
so
had any
crazy.
assigned reading. They've never read fiction. They've never read a book. They've read like textbooks and they've basically studied for the test, but
And
they've
that's
never
it.
like consumed a novel and been able to speak about what was going on in it. And so
Wow.
these are people that are getting to college now and have good grades and stuff and are
Yeah.
even passing things like SATs well because they basically, taught them to the test. So we've got
But
a lot of
not
problems.
yeah.
So you're getting a lesser product, you're spending more for it, and it's a little less valuable not only from the fact that they just won't fail anyone. So it's not the piece of paper that
Yep.
shows that someone can work hard. It really just means they could show up for a few years and
Exactly.
pay a bunch of money.
money.
And people like me that I went back and got an associate's degree, but like I don't have a bachelor's. And every job I've had since then didn't require it at all. In fact, it was like sort of mark against people when we hired people.
Yeah.
Because we did technology and websites and stuff like that. And we kind of needed you to be a
Blake,
better learner than someone that was in college.
It's so funny you say that because I work in technology and I'm a scrum master. So I work with, development teams, and most of the guys, most of the folks that I work with that are developers, a lot of them don't have any degree. They either went through a boot camp or they learned on their own,
or
through
if they
YouTube,
did,
which is,
it wasn't
blows
in
my
that.
mind.
The ones I know, that the best coders I know, if they have a degree, it's not in that. It's in something else.
Something else.
They're just,
Exactly.
And, it's in security or something like that. And but the most talented people I know. And so I go, okay, it's not that I am saying it's stupid to go to college. If you want to be an architect or a lawyer, or there are things, but like if you want to be my brother-in-law is, he tried college. He was never a great student. He just didn't even like it in high school and stuff. And, then he just kind of like had a job for a while, and then he got an electrician apprenticeship where he's getting paid to learn how to be an electrician for 2 years. And then he'll have his license and can start his own business or go work for someone.
He'll probably be making 6 figures.
He's getting paid to do his education. And he'll make 6 figures for sure.
For sure.
He lives in Indianapolis. He'll make really good money. And
that's one of our big skill gaps nowadays, right? Is we have all these people going to college because Blake, I have to assume we grew up around the same time.
Yeah, I graduated 2002. So
so we're all in the same age, but it is funny because we were brought up, and I have to assume you were the same. I was a very moderate Democrat family, but the idea was you have to go to college. Yeah. That was what they told us. You go to college, you can write your ticket. Well,
did your parents go to college?
They did not.
But see, I feel like that was more common with people that either they didn't go to college, so they really wanted their kid to, or you see it with immigrants too.
Yes.
Any first generation, like all the Asian kids I knew at school, like their parents were so hard. I've got a neighbor too that's like, oh yeah, my mom's disappointed that I'm a physical therapist and not a doctor or a lawyer.
You're like, wait, what?
Like, it's just kind of funny. But yeah, but there's sometimes, I think everyone wants better for their kids. That's the thing.
Yes.
And so it makes sense. But I think
I
it was more true in 2000.
I think it was too. And I think we were of the generation, and I talked to somebody who was just a little bit younger than us, maybe by like 7 or 8 years. And I didn't realize the struggle, of the younger millennials compared to us. Cause I know, I always go back and forth. I say, technically, yes, I'm a millennial by the age, but I probably am more Generation X than millennial just because I'm right in that cutoff,
To the thing that says if you're born between 78 and 83, they either call it like elder
Zennial.
millennial or zillennial because you grew up analog, but then you were young enough when technology came along that you learned it. So we lived in both worlds, whereas Gen X, like they were in their mid-20s when they
Yes.
had broadband internet. We were like 19 when we went to college, or 18 or 19 when we went to college and got
That's when it
broadband
just
for the first
started.
time.
Yep.
So it makes a big difference, those like 5, 6, 7 years.
And
And
let's
so,
put it,
yeah, I agree with it.
broadband at that time was probably DSL.
Oh yeah, I mean,
No,
ours was
exactly.
not, but yeah, I came back from college and I was like, guys, we can't have dial up anymore. I
Yeah.
can't. I just told my parents, I was like, we can't do it. I was like, I literally will go insane if I have to dial up to AOL every time after being at like, it was probably like a T1 line in 2002 or something. It was
Yeah.
probably DSL, or it might have been brought, but it was like we were getting 20 down or something. I mean, that was it's just
Exactly.
crazy how
You're just like,
fast we
"What?
thought that was in
Yeah, this is
2002 or whatever.
amazing." Yeah, now
But yeah,
I get mad when my 1 gig service doesn't give me
me
1
too.
gig
Yeah,
delivery, you know?
yeah, I get so
But
spoiled on, yeah.
you do. But no, and this is all great conversation because I think it brings things to show that, how we think and we really, we are people and we want solutions for our country. But, as a conservative part, how did you become the homeless conservative, or how did you get that idea going?
Well, so I'd always wanted to do a political podcast, but I got too in my head about how to do it. I've got a buddy that I was in a band with. So he's like one of my best friends. We've been like, we were in a band forever. We even worked together at jobs after that. So, and we still do a podcast together. And I'd always wanted to do one with him because he's definitely more liberal. I'm more conservative. And that's all we've ever done in our life. I mean,
Yeah.
we talk about lots of stuff, but we talk about politics all the time. And it's never been, it got really weird when we started sorting into like, like Republicans hung out with each other and Democrats hung out. And we
Yeah.
started and I just thought, "Oh, that's weird." I've always, as a musician, I just naturally had more liberal friends than I was. I was
Right.
the odd man out. I'm in Oklahoma though. So it's like, it's a very red state. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. It's
exactly. They're
I'm not,
probably more right liberal than
yeah, I'm not a
left.
conservative in like California or something, but it's,
Right.
so anyway, I mean, I always had these kind of conversations with friends. So we spent most of our early 20s, me and all my buddies that were in bands, you're driving for 8 hours a day and stuff. I mean, we talked about politics a lot and issues, and we really debated stuff. And I've just always loved doing that. And I've never seen it being friction between friends. I've never lost a friend over
Exactly.
politics. Now, I have had to mute some people on Facebook that I didn't want to unfriend because there's something weird that happened when we started doing this online where people shifted. And that's really what made me want to start the podcast, is like when we shifted to the social media stuff, there were people I know and love that I was like,
Mhm.
you are a monster on Twitter. You're like,
And
like
exactly in person, they would never be that way.
they would never do it. And they're like, it's weird. I've worked with people that are the most liberal person I've ever met. We can still have conversations at work, but I can't follow them on Twitter because
Yeah.
I'm like, you're making me not like you. And I know that's not really, it's weird. It's just a
They
weird
get
thing that
and
started happening.
I think us people, we get that false sense of security that, hey, I'm not looking at you in the face. We're not face to face like we used to have to be and have these conversations. So now I can say whatever I want. And if you start making me mad, then I just throw the phone down and just go do
Right.
something else.
And so, I was getting like in fights with people on social media, and I was normally not picking them. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never
See,
minded.
I found the same thing with myself. You want to talk about something that maybe, a conservative did that excites you because it, matches with your morals or your beliefs, and just, posting, hey, this is great. I think that they did this. And next thing you know, you're being attacked by 50 people and you're like,
Yeah.
well, I was just sharing an opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
we can discuss it by all means. I'd love to. That's one of the things that I keep pushing with my platform, is that we need to get back to that place where it doesn't matter what political affiliation you are, what your ideas are. We always have more in common than we don't,
Yeah. And you're not I think what's been broken about what that started was a trend towards, and I think, like I said, I think this all happened right around the time we go to college because we get attacked. September 11th happens. Iraq and Afghanistan are controversial. And that became really the first like 50-50 issue of my lifetime, was probably the Iraq War. Everything that has come after that has been a 50-50 issue. It feels like that you
It
have to
almost
get on
seems
one
like it,
side or the
doesn't
other
it?
immediately, and there's no nuance whatsoever. So I found myself not wanting to talk about stuff like politics on social media as me, Blake Fisher, because
Right.
I was like, it's just not worth, like, I love these people and I don't want to fight with them about stuff, even if I think they're like wildly wrong, and even like towards where I would say, like, you're morally wrong here.
Yeah,
Like,
morally or even
and
slightly evil, right?
yeah, right. And so I didn't want to say evil because the
No,
next thing I was going to say
yeah.
is we also started attributing everyone's motivations to being bad motivations now. So it's not that it's like, it's not that I disagree with liberals. It is now the line from MAGA crowd is they want to destroy America. Now, it's true for some progressives, they do, but that's not most Democrats. Democrats don't want to destroy America. If they, there's no evidence. Now, they might want to do some things that I think would be incredibly harmful to America, but they believe it will help. And I think what is totally flipped is that everyone is out. Everyone assumes the other side is evil. Everyone says the other side is, there's all the conspiracy theory stuff is crazy now. Everything is a conspiracy, everything on both sides. And
it is.
Every election that you lose is stolen. And, this is
always the election deniers since
it was not
20,
just. Well, 2000. Since
Yeah.
2000.
Yeah.
With the
because
Bush
of
Gore.
the hanging chads, right?
But the Bush Gore stuff. So it started look, every Republican that's been elected in my lifetime has been called illegitimate and that he stole the election. It happened with George Bush. It happened with Donald Trump the first time. It happened again in 2020 with even Donald Trump then doing it against the Democrats. And then it would have happened this time if Donald Trump had lost. They would have said that the election was stolen. And if he won, I'm really surprised we didn't get very much of the Democrats saying that he stole it. I think it was so clearly it was decisive, and I was glad it was. But I think that I just was like, this can't keep going on. I know because I've done this my whole life, I've had these conversations with people without losing friendships. And so I just decided I want to make a show where that's possible. Like I've had people on that I think are lunatics. I mean, I had a lady on that was like full on called them January 6th. What did she call them? Gosh, I'm going to forget now. But the point was like sort of political prisoners or something like that. And I was just like, and she reached out to me and I was like, look, I'm going to disagree with you a whole lot on this show. And you're going to have to, you can't lie. You can't come in here and tell me stuff. And when I show you that it's not true, you can't dig your heels in.
Yeah.
Or if you want, that's fine. Just know I'm going to push back hard. And we talked for 4 hours. I only released an hour and a half of it because it got way, way into too many rabbit holes. And she's full on brainwashed by Donald Trump. And it's sad. And I literally told her that on the show. I was just like, look, what I feel bad about is that I would bring up stuff, for example, like the January 6th stuff where there were people with, the gallows with the hang Mike Pence stuff. And, and she claimed she'd never seen that. I believe her. Because that's not shown on any of the news things she watches. None of the YouTube channels she watches, they don't show that stuff. So most of these MAGA people have been brainwashed, frankly. And I'm not saying that they're stupid, but they're not paying attention to sources that would tell them the truth.
And here's the thing, and I can see why that they've done that, because the media has been so, I'll just say it's so left-sided.
The media
they're just like, I'm not going to watch the news anymore. I mean, I'll be honest, I found myself doing that. And I even do it with Fox News too, because they sometimes go so far right that I'm just like, do you even listen to what you're saying? I consider myself a common sense conservative, or maybe even moderate. But it's common sense. And, I don't think anybody should go way too far one way or way too far the other. I'm more for a balance of getting things. I just want to get things done. That's my biggest thing.
Yeah. And I think most of that is, I don't want the government doing it because I think they're bad at it.
That's exactly it.
And
private corporations can do it 100 times better than the government can.
Yeah, I really want the government to get out of people's way because they're the problem. And it's the problem. They're the problem when it's Democrats. They're the problem when it's the Republicans. And so I just saw this landscape of, I felt the same way. I was like, I don't like any of these people anymore. There were still plenty of people I read, but you're right. TV wise, I loved cable news growing up. I really did. I loved it. I think it was, it was great. And I think they did a better job back then. And then it became what it is.
I remember when I was a kid, it doesn't matter what news channel you watch, you'd have the anchor there, and this is 80s TV, right? 80s, 90s. And they would, I swear, all they would do is just say, here's the facts, blah, 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 blah. This side thinks this side thinks that. Now it's yours to decide what you want, and there'd just be a little bubble over their shoulder. And
they were certainly biased then, but it was, they were trying to hide it a little better.
Yes.
And now they're just full on partisan.
They're not hiding it at all.
It's full on. My favorite thing to do whenever sort of a buzzy subject comes up like that, especially dealing with Donald Trump, is just go. Because I read a lot of different sites, even the ones that I know I'm going to disagree with pretty strongly. It's like good to know what people are saying. It's good to know what people are thinking
from both sides.
I like to know the arguments so that when someone throws me the ridiculous argument, I've heard it before and I can have a point for it. And so, because I like debating people on this kind of stuff. And I just realized okay, there's all these people that are not doing that anymore. With the Donald Trump issues, if this week was sort of, well, I'm not going to get into this week because remember, this is going to be later. But what
That's
happens
all
all
right.
the time with Donald Trump.
We'll just let everybody know that, hey, this is recorded 3 months before the release
Okay,
date.
so this was 3 months ago. It probably will not be a thing that anyone remembers at this point. But this week was the whole half the cabinet accidentally looped Jeffrey Goldberg from the Atlantic in on a group text on Signal and laid out their attacks on the Houthis in Yemen 2 hours in advance. And for like a week in advance, or like 4 days in advance, he had access to this chat where they're talking about, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this? And this is the vice president. This is Pete Hegseth. This is all of them. Maybe this won't be a scandal in 3 months, and it'll sound absolutely ridiculous that I'm talking about it. But to me, there was never been a more black and white story than this. Jeffrey Goldberg didn't chase this story down. He didn't have anonymous sources. This wasn't him trying to nail Trump on something. This was, they accidentally invited him to a Signal chat that he thought was fake until the bombs dropped in Yemen. He was like, I assumed someone was trying to get me to do something stupid. Our whole staff, I talked to our lawyers. We were like, what should we do? Because we don't really think this is real. But then all of a sudden, Pete Hegseth is talking about where and when these bombs are going to drop and what kind. And then 2 hours later on the dot, 1:45 rolls around, they start dropping, and he's actually in the real chat with all these people. Well, in my opinion, I was like, this is such a black and white story. This is foolishness and an accident on the Trump administration part, but some negligence, because if it, Pete Hegseth should not have been talking about the things he was talking about. In that is not, they cannot use Signal for that. That is classified
they should be
information.
Using some type of secure platform that citizens probably don't even have access to.
No, it's just them. It's only and they've got to be in skiffs. They got they ain't gonna fall. And the thing is, everyone in that cabinet had been upset about Hillary Clinton's email servers and the fact that all those things that the Democrats had done that were unsecure or classified documents. But then we got Donald Trump taking classified documents, and this happens. And I go, this is as black and white as possible. Even if you want to say no one should be fired for this, we should demand as citizens that this be cleaned up, and we know the rules.
That this
and
doesn't
there's not
happen
people
again.
using because if it hadn't been Jeffrey Goldberg that got that text,
could you imagine?
Someone would have gone live with it, and you put American soldiers at risk because fortunately, Jeffrey Goldberg is the kind of person that happened on the 15th. He didn't release the story till the 24th.
Right.
Because they wanted to do, they weren't trying to rush to be famous. And look, or what if it was someone that is an Iranian, they could have been an Iranian national that they texted in there, and they could give the heads up to the Houthis, and they could counterattack us. There's so many more ways that it could have gone wrong.
Yes.
And to me, as American citizens, I go, look, all we should worry about is how do you clean that mess up? Do we need to fire people? Were people negligent? What are the rules? We need to make sure people are punished for the rules. And I don't care if it's a Democrat or a Republican that does the wrong thing. I go,
no, exactly. And that
stuff is going to cost lives. It's really important. And that's part of my problem with Donald Trump has been he's careless with national secrets that put people's lives in danger. And you can't argue against that. He says
too much where he should say very little.
He's done it multiple times where he burns our allies, sources and stuff. He's done it multiple times where he's just trying to show off to the dictator of North Korea and let something off where you're the British guy has to pull in the MI6 has to pull in a guy before he gets killed in Pakistan or something.
Exactly.
And to me, I go, that stuff's very serious and we should take it very seriously. And I just looked at all the websites and what are they talking about? Well, you couldn't find a story about it on a conservative one that didn't go, Jeffrey Goldberg, who's a hoax journalist and a fraud, says this happened. I'm and at that point, it had been confirmed by the White House to be the legitimate conversation. This is this has been sourced out. The White House knew this was coming. Everyone knew this was coming. And it's almost like the press knew it was coming and they just buried it on the right for the most part. Or they made it look like this was Jeffrey Goldberg with a hoax.
It was his fault. He somehow infiltrated
that service. He didn't do anything. He actually did all the right things that you should do in that situation.
And here's the thing though, Blake, because of how the media has been so polarized, most people will probably think along party lines.
That's exactly right.
This is nothing. This is no big deal. The left's just blowing it out of proportion.
Right, exactly.
And the left's going to be this is a huge deal. They did this. But in reality, you're right. It's black and white. They screwed up. Luckily they admitted that they screwed up. I mean, that's the first part, right? But they
wouldn't have if Jeffrey Goldberg didn't go live with the thing. I mean, and they haven't really admitted it because here's the other thing that's stupid that I don't want to, it's this very moment, which is, whatever time it is, there's still a dispute. Like Pete Hegseth is saying, and the cabinet is saying there was no
Yeah,
classified
war
information in
plans.
that text.
Right.
And Jeffrey Goldberg is saying they gave times, weapon systems, all this kind of stuff, which would be classified. And so
Sure.
one of them is lying, and I'm confident that Jeffrey Goldberg will just give the text screenshots
Well,
to the
that's
Senate
what-
Intel Committee, and we'll know, but we don't know
That's what
right now.
I was hoping that, would happen. I'm like, obviously, if you got it and it did have that, you would have taken screenshots. I'm sure I would.
Oh, he did. No, because they were included in the article, except that he said at a certain point, once he said, Pete Hegseth, once he announced what was going to happen, he said, I'm not going to write any more details because
of that.
it would compromise national security. And so it's, he could be lying about that. I don't think he is, though, because
I think we'll find out.
He was also checking at the exact time that Pete Hegseth said bombs would be dropping if they'd be dropping in Yemen. So it's like, well, why would he have been checking if bombs were dropping in Yemen if you didn't get the time? So someone's lying there, and I'm sure we'll get that revealed. My guess is Jeffrey Goldberg was not a dummy and did not purposely give it to the Senate Intel Committee before their hearings today. Because anyway, the point is, I think he's playing the long game on this. Catch him in the lies, rather, because I think they will look really stupid. But this is a thing that's black and white. I don't want Democrats. I think that's what really bothers me is I wish we would have punished Hillary Clinton for her email server stuff. Because to me, anyone other than her would have been prosecuted for that.
I agree with you. Yep.
If you did that at the FBI, they'd fire you. If you were a junior staffer and you did that, like anyone else would be fired and possibly charged.
Well,
for that.
I don't know. I would say, given how the FBI had been over the last several years, I may or may not have, I'll be honest with you, as a former law enforcement person, the FBI was always the cream of the crop, right, to the law enforcement community. They were the people, I don't want to say we looked up to, but we went to when we needed stuff done. Yeah. But the FBI over the last several years, I'd say probably 5 to 6 years, because I don't want to put it all on the Biden administration, has just gone so downhill and just went down these rabbit holes that none of the people want. And we're really, from my perspective as a cop, the FBI needs to go back to being cops. Well, that's what they need to do.
I think most of them are. It's just not the DC ones.
No,
from the things DC I understand
about
that's the political ones. And you shouldn't have. I think the behavior has been worse than the last 7 years. I actually think they've been pretty bad for a long time. Yeah. Now they weren't as politically bad, but I think they have been. You look at like the Section 702 violations that they were doing on American citizens. You look like this is not partisan stuff. This is like they are violating Americans' rights all the time. And most of their cases these days, they need to get a lot of wins, and this is a problem with the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of the FBI stuff is borderline entrapment at this point. It is like
really
they've been putting like there was the story several years ago. I'm not going to remember all the details, but I know that it was like a kid that was clearly mentally not okay, like not school shooter, not okay, like pretty dumb, like clearly had an IQ problem.
Yeah, lower IQ,
He essentially gets tricked into thinking he's blowing up this bank or whatever. But like everyone else in this circle of people that are doing this are FBI agents.
Yeah.
And he's the only one that's not. It's like a hidden camera show of sorts. And you're like, you guys entrapped basically a retarded person. Like, just like this guy was that mentally not, and he just joined the crowd. And I go, that's not okay. Like we should be going after real people that are really dangerous. And I think the FBI needs a total restructure of going back to going after drug dealers and white collar crime and the things that are really like people that are really evil out there, child traffickers,
maybe politicians,
Yeah, maybe some of them.
Exactly.
And pay less attention. They shouldn't do anti-terrorism anymore. I think we need to split that off into a different agency.
Its own, like maybe, See, and that's my thing. But when Donald Trump started doing all this government, efficiency stuff, one of my views that I've always seen is I don't understand why we have ATF, why we have, ATF for one, because they're there to regulate firearms, which is a right.
They should exist.
Exactly. So I'm like, so we got the ATF, we've got the DEA, we've got the CIA, we've got the FBI, right? That all kind of Department of Homeland Security. Sorry, that's in there now
everything.
Too.
But it's
right?
above all of everything. It's supposed to coordinate everyone.
Yeah. But it's like, do we really need all these separate departments? Because if you think about it, you could have the FBI with the division of drugs, the divisions of, alcohol and tobacco, whatever. But you could have just little divisions within the FBI. We don't need to have our own bureaucracies out there doing these things.
I think there's some overlap that needs to go away. For example, almost every agency has its own, and I'm not just talking about law enforcement. I'm talking about like almost all of them have a civil rights area. Like, so the Department of Education has a civil rights department, and so does the, I don't know, NEA or whatever, all these. Well, it's like, why don't we just have one agency that does all of the civil rights stuff?
Yeah.
One agency that does all of the domestic law enforcement. Now, there is going to be an overlap on, for example, counterterrorism, because you're going to have the CIA and
you
the
have
local,
to. Yep.
but you have to keep them where the CIA is doing all the foreign stuff and the local ones doing local stuff in coordination with them or something. Like, you got to make sure you're not spying on American citizens is basically what I'm trying to figure out with the law enforcement thing. That's my biggest problem with.
I have such a huge problem with that too. Ever since 9/11, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And we started giving away our rights
Just
to feel a
gave
little
it
bit
away.
safer. And it's like now we're coming here and you see like the FBI going to school board meetings to look at parents,
Right.
and
Which
you're
is
like, wait a second, this is really that is what's important. We've got drug dealers and people buying making bombs, and people that want to cause mass death in this country, and you think it's great to go to a school board meeting under any circumstance. To me, that is a misuse of resources.
I agree. And it's one of those things where I think they behave badly over multiple presidents, and they've gotten more and more political. And to me, you just got to go, okay, we're at least shutting down the Washington part. I think that the FBI should not exist in Washington.
Well, and I think where Kash Patel came in and said, hey, I want to shut down the D.C. office and then send all the agents back out to the field offices. That, for me, I was like, absolutely, that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have some sort of, but it shouldn't be the overwhelmingly ran from Washington, D.C. You can have a D.C. bureau, but it shouldn't be
it's
the
like
big
an
thing.
admin office, right? It's like where your administrative things are, maybe some leadership that needs to coordinate with all the field offices. But you're right, the majority of the agents should be out in the field.
Yeah, and that is going to be a field naturally, just because it's also the nation's capital. But it's just one of those things. I think all of it needs to. I wish we had a thing in Congress that would just go, if we create something, we have to, it sunsets in X amount of years.
Yes.
And it's not like we keep just kicking that can down the road. It's like, does this agency need to exist anymore? Or did it accomplish what we needed to? So we can spin up an agency for a few years, and then it just goes away in 10 years if you don't renew
it doesn't have to be permanent.
But you have to make Congress have to do their job again and actually say, do we need this anymore? And we're not I think unfortunately a terrorist attack is going to happen before the FBI actually gets reformed. That would be my prediction. Yeah, I don't think Kash Patel will really, because he's not really interested in the things in my opinion, I don't think he's interested in the things he says he's interested in. I think Donald Trump wants the power to tell the FBI what to do and use them politically. It's pretty clear that that's what he wants, because he wants to fire the people that investigated him, but he wants to investigate other people the exact same way they investigated him.
Exactly.
So I go,
he needs to just get off of that, and just say, okay, we're getting out of that. We're like you said, we're taking the political bias out of the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Right. But do you think Kash Patel will tell him no? I don't.
So this is the hard part, right? Even though he's a bureaucrat and he was, confirmed, he's still, to me, anybody that's in a cabinet position is still a politician. They have to sell themselves. They have to do what's right. So, based on what he said, I'd like to think that he would tell him no, but he's still a politician and he's got a job he's got to protect.
People will. I do think Marco, there's going to be a couple of them that I think they'll be gone quicker than I do not think this cabinet's lasting for even this next year. I think
probably
we'll have people gone. So, but that's going to be they don't tell them no, they resign and walk away kind of thing. And they basically do tell them no. But I mean, I don't think Kash Patel would even try to walk him off a ledge. I don't think most of these people are even telling Donald Trump, maybe you should think about that. I think he's saying jump and they're saying how high, or he's ready, fire, aim, however you want to call it. And I think that's pretty dumb on Trump's part, because some of these people would be very good at their jobs and you should listen to them. They're smarter than you on the thing that you hired them to do. You should listen to them. He's not. He's going, this is what I want to do. You figure out a way to make it seem like we did this the right way.
You're right. And exactly. I think, here's my goal, make it happen.
Kash Patel's going to fail at that. I don't see any way he doesn't do it, because I think he picked so many, when loyalty is the first thing that matters to you. And then secondarily to that is, can you do the job well? You're going to have a bunch of people that are probably not very good at just like blocking and tackling, just like the stuff that they have to do as the head of the FBI or as the head of Pete Hegseth running the Pentagon. I mean, that seems crazy to me, because you have no experience managing anyone ever. And the two charities you ran were in debt. And it's like,
I would go the other way, because he was an officer in the U.S. military. He did some
but
time overseas.
There's 3 million people right now.
But just because these generals are in there, most of the Secretary of Defense had been generals before, does not mean that they did a good job just because they were a general.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree
That's
that
where
it
I'm
doesn't.
saying, like, when people say, "Well, he's never run this, he's never run that," and I'm like, but
No,
sometimes those are the best people
but I'm
to
talking. He
have.
should have ran like he should have been like. I would take, for example, if someone put like Steve Jobs at the top of. I mean, Steve Jobs is dead, but if you said
Right. I
Steve
know you said
Jobs run the Department
hypothetically.
of Defense, you'd be like, absolutely, that guy has ran $1 billion company.
Well,
He
now
would
see,
do,
I would be the other way around because I'd be like, what does he know about defense?
but like my point is,
I
most of
would
what you
want
have to do
somebody,
is the. But
I
most
would
of what you
want
have to do,
somebody. It's administrative. I'll give you that.
because there's
But I
3
would,
million people that work there, so like it
but
is
it
very
is.
administrative.
But it's very administrative, and I would rather have someone in there that has had their boots on the ground and knows what the troops that are going through, so that they make decisions based on what the troops are going to have to do, than the people that have just run businesses and had dealt with a lot of money and just say, "Well, I'm just going to send these kids off to their death because it's just numbers."
Right,
You
but I
know,
think you could do like the smart thing. What I would do if I was like, if someone was like Pete Hegseth has to be somewhere in your administration because his dad gave you $1 billion. I don't know, whatever the reason is that you want him in. I mean, it's just because he's not good on TV. Essentially, is why he wants in the administration. But I would make him like head of recruiting. Like that's what we have a problem with is recruiting right now. He would kill at that job. He'd be amazing at
he
that
would be
job.
good at that job. Yeah,
That's my point. And
but
like
you
and
know,
have
my
and he could
I
be
guess
the
my thing
deputy
is
something. You know.
I've seen all these career generals and, people or past generals that have gone in there that really have been political people. And so I look at this as like a fresh new way of looking. Like you said, when we dissolve departments, hey, well, let's look at it after a while. Let's put him in here. Let's give him a chance. Let's see what he's going to do. If
Yeah,
he doesn't do a
I'm
good
okay
job,
with
let's
that
get
with
rid of
like
him.
Department of Education, but DOD, I go,
I see. I don't
we
because
could
he
get our
was.
asses handed to us by
But
another country in the meantime.
this guy served. He's been there on the front line. He knows what the troops need to do. He knows what the training needs to be to get these people there. And the money part, and the other administrative stuff, you can surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah, I guess my concern there is like you are rolling the dice on something that you
You could
might
say that
only
about
get.
the president, right?
Well,
I
well, of
mean,
course. Except the problem is like to
and
me,
he's the commander in chief, right? He's got no military experience whatsoever, and he
right,
can say,
which,
"Hey, this is a terrorist group. Go bomb the shit out of them."
yeah,
And
I just
boom,
don't
they're
think that
going.
every soldier is therefore potentially good at running the Pentagon. I don't think that. Like,
I'm not saying
sure,
that
I
every
think it's a
single one is.
quality.
No,
I think
but
it's
yes.
quality, but I would rather have someone that had been in the military and had managed a team of 6 people even. This guy was just on TV. You go like,
Well,
and
no,
I'm not
but
saying that doesn't mean he's not smart.
But no, I think that's a very mischaracterization. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He managed more than 6 people in the Army.
No, that's true. Yeah, you
You know,
would've. Yeah,
so
you're
I
right.
mean,
You would've. So
he
that's
probably had
fair.
a whole battalion. I'm just saying
That's fair.
that's and that's where I just go in and say, just because he wasn't a businessman, let's give him a chance. There's still other people in there. He's not going to fail. There's still generals that are out there that from the last administration and probably more administrations beforehand that are, not going to put their men in harm's way.
Yeah, and I think my big problem there is that I don't think Donald Trump actually has the. I think Pete Hegseth probably does have the soldiers' best interest at heart, and I don't think Donald Trump does. I do not believe he does. I think that going back to Jeffrey Goldberg, I believe the suckers and losers stuff. I mean, it's a Fox News reporter confirmed it right after the story broke. John Kelly, and like you think all these people. I'm not saying you, but just because it did come up in this week that we're recording this because Jeffrey Goldberg's in the news again. I believe it. I mean, that is his attitude. Is if I don't have something to gain from this, why would anyone do that? Like he doesn't understand why someone would sign up for the military voluntarily. He doesn't understand it, and so that concerns me. When you have someone that feels that way, it's not that I think he doesn't have a heart for them on an individual level. I think he's done more than most of the presidents as far as like calling someone's parents who died. Like that is the kind of stuff he's shown up for. But I feel like I don't feel like he takes the weight very seriously of having to make calls that are going to put those people's lives in danger when he does things like carelessly strews about classified documents that could put those people in danger, or doesn't fire someone. And like I said, it's been months now. So like, but this signal thing, I'd be like, you're fired.
Yeah,
you cannot treat our like people could have gotten killed. You're fired. Like I would have fired Pete Hegseth this week.
The classified document thing, that doesn't bother me. I mean, Joe Biden had classified documents that he shouldn't have even had in his house that were completely unsecure. At least Trump's were in a secure filing
but
cabinet.
Trump was bragging about stuff too. And like I said, he burned sources for other countries.
He's a New Yorker. That's what they do.
But like, that's my point is he doesn't.
Some people don't realize that this guy's from New York. He is an 80s New Yorker, right? 70s, 80s New Yorker who they were all just big talk, big flamboyant folks that's how they were, you know?
That's my point.
You
He
got to read
cares
through that.
cares more about himself than anyone else in the world. And
I don't think so. I would disagree with you 100%. And let me
Okay.
tell you why.
Okay.
This man has millions of dollars, and he could be sitting in Trump Tower right now or playing golf and doing nothing. If he didn't care about, if he didn't care about the people, that's what he would be doing. That's my thought.
My argument would be, what if he just likes the power and he's doing this to make more money?
What politician doesn't like the power?
So are you bothered at all by like the meme coin stuff and the sort of cashing in on being the president? Like
it doesn't bother me. If he wants to do that.
So, but I mean, hold on.
I don't care.
You don't think it's corrupt at all that he's in charge of the agency that regulates cryptocurrency and releases a meme coin 2 days before taking office? Like, you don't see a conflict of interest there that seems grubby and that like foreign nationals could be sending him money?
So I could say the same thing. What about all the politicians in the House and the Senate that have used, stocks? So I mean,
totally
until
agree. Same
until
thing.
we're going to
It's
fix
the
it, it's what's good for one is good for the other.
Right, but I guess that's I don't like the answer to corruption.
I'm not saying that's right, but I'm just saying, based on what's going on with him, this guy has lost money by being in office. Not gained any.
No, he will be richer when he leaves office this time than he was when he went in.
Yes, when he leaves, he will.
No, like by the time he leaves, he's getting richer right now because of
all
those
his
things.
Stocks are down. All his stocks are down. His Trump media is down
that's
over
his fault.
$10 a share.
No, but here's the thing. But there's another thing. Trump media. That's a way that people can invest in his company, and he can get so people from outside of our country can give Donald Trump money. He's doing $5 million dinners at Mar-a-Lago.
Mm-hmm.
This is open corruption. And my point is, he wants to make money. He wants to cash in on the presidency.
I just don't see that. I mean, I think we'll agree to disagree on that. Because,
that's fine.
And I'm not saying that you're not wrong because, hey, if it comes out, I'll be the first one to say Blake said it. I said that, no, I disagree, but guess what? I was wrong.
So, okay, here's my question for that then. Is there a line in the sand for you? Is there something he could do that would say you're like, that's too corrupt?
Yeah, I mean, if he was taking direct cash payments from people,
that's what he's doing right now.
If he was he's selling something, right?
No, he's selling a dinner. He's selling a dinner with himself. And he's selling a meme coin. That's not a tangible thing. That is a
meme coin is a tangible thing. It's a coin. It's a meme coin.
But not
you can make money off of it.
Well, you can, but you can.
But it's not a thing. I'm just saying
But you can also swindle and get out and make a bunch of your followers lose the money, and then you gain the money. I mean, that's the system that's going on with these meme coins right now.
I mean, the meme coins to me is like nothing. It's a meme coin. How many people are actually going to buy it?
He was $50 billion or 50. Yeah, it was worth $50 billion on that first night. His stakes in it.
Okay,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I'll take you for that. And I mean, if that's his and he's the one controlling it and not his company, because remember, he's supposed to be stepping back from his company.
He never did. He said he was going to. He never did. That's my point. Is he's cashing in on this.
How do you know he never did though?
Because he never divested any of that stuff. He's been fully involved in it.
Well, no, he put his son in charge of the companies.
Well, maybe running it, but he was still on the books. He's still he's still getting paid for it all, and he wasn't not making decisions.
Well, he's still the owner, but he's not. He can't make any conflict of interest.
Well, but even they charged the Secret Service more to stay in his hotels than they would normal people because he knew they couldn't say no to it. Well, so there's even that kind of stuff where you're like,
is that corruption or is that smart?
I think that's corruption.
I don't think it's corruption. I mean, I don't know.
Jimmy Carter, but he sold his peanut farm. Just sold it. Like, got rid of it entirely. And it was a peanut farm.
But didn't he still gain money while he was in the White House?
I don't actually know, but not
I think he
lot,
did.
probably.
Yeah.
But I don't mind people making money, like consulting and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't or getting paid 50.
Here's my thing.
Speech.
This guy was a businessman before he went into office. So knowing that he's a businessman, just like any other businessman, right? He's going to continue to make money off of things that he sells.
Right.
He's going to.
Does it not bother you at all that there's a line where he's now wanting money from businesses so that he doesn't go after them regulatorily? Like this
that
is
should be wrong. I mean, if you can prove
corruption.
that, absolutely,
that's happening already.
He should be
Mark
charged
Zuckerberg.
for that.
No, that's already happening. It's because if he sues you and you settle, that's not bribery. That's settling out of so Mark Zuckerberg is settled, ABC News is settled, CBS is probably going to settle. There's all these, and then on top of that, you've got people like Apple saying, oh yeah, we'll do X, Y, and Z. Oh, we'll give X amount of dollars to your thing. It's so they don't get punished because Donald Trump is going to, if you don't do that, you will be punished. That's why Mark Zuckerberg is all of a sudden conservative.
Well, that's true. That threw me off.
That's why.
There.
Same
that
with Amazon, Jeff, whatever his name is,
Bezos. Yeah, yeah,
Bezos.
yeah.
Elon Musk. Look, Elon Musk was a Democrat a year ago, and all of a
He
sudden
was
he's. But
250 million, what,
this is
million or
about
billion? Yeah,
this is
whatever he
about
gave.
people getting to make money off of the backs of American people, in my opinion. And I think we can already see, and it's just that like he's
So
doing it so openly
I
that
guess here's the difference, right? He's making money off of, if this is true what you're saying, and again, I haven't seen any sources or anything that you have. So
well, I mean,
I
like
mean,
Mark
I can
Zuckerberg
only
settled
take
for
it.
$10 million, and there's no reason that he needed to do that. There's like he's not
Well,
Donald Trump's
you
not going
know,
to win that libel suit. It's
but
just
no,
yeah.
but what you don't understand about the legal system is it's cheaper to settle than to say, no, I'm not wrong, and then go through and possibly lose.
Right. Except that like the problem is that's not us. That's you are settling with a single person. That's the president of the United States. And so
Well, I
that's
mean, but he had a legal right to the lawsuit. I mean, the judge didn't throw it out. So
yeah. But I mean, I just think
I'm
that
just
there's
saying. I mean, I think you got to take it with a grain of salt. I really do, because I think you're kind of grasping here, for saying, oh, well, he sued him. Well, he should have sued him because he denied his right to free speech.
well, but that's not, he doesn't, the Facebook is not protected free speech. They're not the government. You can't sue someone for free speech violations. You can sue the government for free speech violations. That's my point. This lawsuit would have gone nowhere because look, if Sarah Palin didn't win that libel suit with the New York Times, no one's going to win a libel suit ever because she should have won that. Like, I think she had them dead to rights knowing what they printed was a lie and that it was attacking her character and blaming her for something that wasn't her fault. And she still didn't win that. So I just go, it's like really hard for the media specifically to get hit on that stuff. And then I just feel like I just feel like there's like the Tesla stuff has been pretty gross in my opinion.
Yeah,
I also
that's
think
been
the
pretty
behavior
gross,
towards Tesla has been gross, but doing a White House lawn commercial for Tesla,
But Biden did the same thing for Jeep.
I know it's,
So,
but
I
I
mean,
don't
I'm
like,
just
I
like,
don't like any of it. Like that's my point is that
to me, though, that's what a president should do. They should be. Now, I do realize because of the closeness of Elon and President Trump
that's
that
weird.
that's a little bit different. But,
Yeah, because Donald Trump
I do
certainly
agree
owes
that
him.
an American president should highlight American companies.
Yeah, but highlighting them, I think both of those were highlighted for the wrong reasons.
They were.
Biden was his obsession with electric cars, and that's why he's doing Jeep, is because they came out with the 4xe, which I do love actually. But like that was Biden's whole, he wanted everything to be electric. And I don't like that Joe Biden was trying to force the country to go somewhere that consumers
especially
didn't want to go.
when our grid's not even ready for it yet.
So, and look, I have a Jeep. I love Jeep. I didn't like that Joe Biden did that because it was this perversion thing. It was using the White House as to sling a car. And I go, look, it's fine to go to a ribbon cutting ceremony at a new factory. These are the kind of things that I go, yes, that's what we should do.
I get your point for that.
But at the White House, and both of them are guilty of this, like just exactly like you said, it bothers me. And then Donald Trump is doing the same thing, except there's just even a grosser relationship there because it's not the eco thing. It's just Elon. And that's weird.
It is funny, though, that you said how similar Biden and Trump are. Boom, right there's a perfect
It's another
example.
thing. It's the same. It's just that for Biden, it was all about pandering to this like really fringe version of his base that thinks, the world, we're better off going back to being serfs because we wouldn't be polluting the atmosphere or whatever. And it's a bunch of, we're way too bored because we're way too rich is basically the problem in this country for the most part.
What? I think going back to our conversation about Trump, I think I just realized kind of a bias on my part that because he's taking this money from rich people, I really don't care, and I think that's a bias because if he was doing it to me, I sure as hell would care. Right.
Yeah. But here's the thing. You say that Donald Trump is the worst offender of the preying on elderly people with fear-mongering emails and recurring donations that they set up in a way that they don't really know. There was who was it? It was Politico, I think, that did, or I got to look it up now. I'll try to send you the link if I can find it. But they did like an investigation into basically there were a bunch of senior citizens that were, Alzheimer's, dementias, things like that.
Yeah.
And, like this one guy had given $4 million to one of the PACs or something. And they'd done this investigation of like, they were preying, and look, the Democrats do it too, but like Donald Trump did it they had the charts of all the money, and Donald Trump PACs specifically, and Donald Trump's even campaign, like was the worst offender at like doing sneaky recurring donations, especially to elderly people, and like draining them of their life savings, like millions of dollars. And some of that stuff then started getting investigated, and they were like, gave it back so that they wouldn't get hammered for it.
Gotcha.
So
That
to
was
me,
that was
there's
gonna be my next question to say, hey, what happened to that? If it
some
was,
of it
yeah,
did have to be given back. Some of it is still in litigation and stuff. Like I said, I'll try to find it. I can't remember if it was. I feel like it was Interceptor or Politica. I can't remember. It was someone. It was like a full. It was like I can remember the graphics. I can't remember the.
yeah.
That's why
And
the
see,
problem is.
this is a great option too, because I know we're going to talk about it, but media and politics, and this goes back to what I said earlier, right? You read things from both sides of the aisle, and I've found myself going more towards things I like to read, which is probably why some of this stuff you're talking about with Trump I haven't seen,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And it goes to show that, and that's, because of that bias in the media, I'm probably not as well educated on what those topics are as I should be.
I will say this though, it is very hard to be.
It
That's what
is.
bothers me is that it's really hard to do that. And people ask me fairly often, especially friends, they're like, "Well, who do you pay attention to?" And I'm like, well, get ready. Because what I've found is that it's really less like organizationally, I have a lot of distrust in a lot of organizations now. And
Mhm.
basically, I sometimes will write that entire thing off, but I still pay attention to it. I mean, I'm checking everything. I'm not verifying, I'm not believing anything I read until I verify it somewhere else. So, like, I subscribe to the New York Times. They get it
Mhm.
wrong a lot of the time. They have a very liberal bias, but they also do some great reporting. They do some stuff that no one else can because they're bigger than other
Right.
people. And you know what? I go into it with skepticism. I go, they're probably any environmental stat I'm going to go look up because they're probably lying about it, and they'll
Yeah.
never make the correction
Or
on it.
there's
And I
six
just
six other reports that, counter that one or whatever.
right,
Yeah.
but I know it because it's been so obvious for so long. And that's the funny thing about the media trying to lie to us about things like Biden's age, for example, is like no one believed it. Like they are lying all the time and they have a bias, but no one's buying it. It's just unfortunate that you're right. Now it's very hard to find a place that won't lie to you about something
Yeah.
because Fox
Something
News
you're
is
going to
going to lie
get.
to you and MSNBC is going to lie to you. In fact, one time, like when Greg Gutfeld took over the late night,
Yeah. On.
the ratings. He was beating like Jimmy Fallon and all the other
Mhm.
people on Stephen Colbert. I was like, well, that's interesting. But I really had not watched late night in a forever amount of time because I used to love Letterman. And I just feel like everything after that,
You
it's
know
not been
what?
great.
Same with me. I was like, yeah, after Letterman, I watched
I
Conan
know.
maybe for a little bit.
I
And
liked
then,
Conan. I loved Craig Ferguson. I thought he was fantastic. But since Craig Ferguson, I've really not watched anyone. And I was like,
yeah.
I'm going to watch Colbert and Gutfeld tonight, just like for fun, because I've not watched either one of those shows in forever. And you would think they were filmed on different days. Like they did not. It was during the Biden
Right.
administration, and it was like nothing inconvenient to Democrats was mentioned on Colbert show, and nothing inconvenient to Trump because he was in all his legal stuff at the time. Nothing, and so you would have thought they were filmed on different days because they were just going. They're catering to their audience, and you're just not bumping up against. So
Or
if our
like
late
two
night,
different countries they're talking
right?
to almost.
So that's our late night entertainment. That's like all in looking for only one side of that 50-50 coin, or really they're not even looking
Yeah.
for a 50-50 coin. They're looking in that 30% of people that are split 15-15 that are voting in, like that's who they're looking for. They're not looking for the vast middle. And then the news is the same thing. So like most news channels, same thing. It's like, so I have found that I like certain writers that I gravitate towards, and then I just read them no matter where they are. Unfortunately, when they're at a bunch of different places that have subscriptions, yeah,
Yeah.
I have to
That
spend
gets.
some money on it. And I wish there were better, I wish there was more, because most of YouTube is not fair to say most. There is a lot of performative political stuff on YouTube. That's how
Yeah.
I'll put it.
Yep.
Where they're even worse than the people I read that are like that, or
Yes.
Fox News. Like they are,
No, you're absolutely. It's like
they're Dan
whatever
Bongino, Tucker
whatever
Carlson.
yeah, whatever you see on the news, go onto social media and then ramp that up about 5,000%.
Yes. And it's probably totally lies. They know
Yep.
it's lies. They know there's like, it is full on partisan nonsense. And I think most people see through that if they don't
Yeah.
like it, and they go, I said, too hard to pay attention to all this stuff. So I wish it was a little bit easier. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do, basically, is like
Yeah.
be a more reasonable. Hey, I'm a conservative. That's my bias. I'm going to tell you that no matter what. But I also I'm just a junkie for this stuff. And so you don't have to, listen to a 2-hour podcast every day if you don't want to, because I think that most people don't need that much politics in their life. Like, you shouldn't. We need some
No,
people that do that. Let
yeah.
me be the bearer of that. I get enjoyment
Even
out
myself,
of it.
I love politics, but even now and then I have to disconnect and just get away from everything and just say that not need a few days without it, and
I did it
we'll
all
be
last
fine.
week, basically. I mean, I checked in on stuff, but I didn't like think about it in a creative kind of way or anything. I didn't it was like once a day. I just checked would make sure nothing super crazy
Make sure
happened that I
there's
needed to
nothing
hop on a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you go. I think that part, that split of people being so willing to get in. First of all, there's a lot of people who just want to be in that filter bubble, and then it is
Mhm.
really hard if you don't want to be to get out of it, because it is. I think it's just very hard to trust people. One thing that I tell people, I think reading's better. I think that even though I have a show, I'm not a good writer. So I'm like, I'm just better at talking. So I'm going to do a show. But I do think that you get either you get way more nuance in conversations. So that's why podcasts are so
Yep.
popular, I think, is because people are getting real conversations that are, back and forth. That's why they're willing to listen to long conversations if they're interesting. And good, big, deep political things are generally not talked about by the politicians because they need little pithy things that can say no tax on tips or and they don't want to talk about the complications of do we have the money to do that and national
Exactly.
debt. That's just not how campaigning works anymore. And they're not willing to do it once they get in office either. And so podcasts are becoming the place where you can do that. So podcasts are a good way. And then I don't read things. If you don't cite sources, if it doesn't have a link out in every paragraph that goes to some quote or some other source that they're pointing to, I don't trust it. I just think that there's no excuse for not linking out to every single source in your article. And I'll go read, some article and it will be a 5-minute read with 0 links inside of it. And I just go,
and you're
I
like,
can't
wait,
believe.
is this an opinion article? What is this? Yeah.
And even if it was opinion, most of the opinion stuff I read has 50 links in it.
That's true. To show you the basis for
to show you the base and or this person said this, or on this show they said this, and here's this thing, and here's this quote, and here's this history. And I like that because I love to go down those rabbit holes of oh, well, that's an interesting point. I'm going to go read that guy's art. And that's just what I like to do. I enjoy, I don't carve out enough time to reading books, but I do that kind of topical deep dive. And I think people are willing to do it. It's just, it's too hard right now.
Yeah. And the thing is with the internet and with everything else, you're like, where do I start? So I guess you just got to start somewhere and just start, what do you like? You realize that even if you're going to, MSNBC or Fox News, take it with that knowledge of knowing that it's going to have that, bias to it.
Right.
And try to discern for yourself what is the truth, and then maybe take what you hear and then do some additional research to find out what that truth is.
And to me, the most refreshing thing that can possibly happen is when someone gets onto their own side. That, to me, instant credibility when a Democrat calls out Joe Biden. I mean, honestly, the only Democrat that gets any respect from me these days is Dean Phillips, because he ran against Joe Biden and said, "This is crazy, guys. He can't run for another term."
Yeah.
He was the only one. The rest of them are cowards, just like the Republicans are cowards to not stand up to Donald Trump, even when it would benefit Donald Trump. For example, them tanking the Matt Gaetz confirmation was good for Donald Trump. That would not have. Matt Gaetz is interested in nothing. You talk about a guy that only cares about himself and only cares about that guy is skeezy. And it's crazy to me.
What's funny is when he first came up, the first thing that came to me is seeing him in, hearings and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay, he's a smooth talker. He brings up some good points. But then once I heard about all the stuff in his background, I was like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have that guy, regardless if it's true or not.
But he doesn't have a legislative staff. It's all comm staff. To me, that says you have no interest in legislating. You want to be on TV, and I just don't trust
there to be a talking head. Yeah,
you want to be a talking head, and he would have caused Trump headaches. I mean, first of all, just the underage girl stuff is enough to go my gosh,
I couldn't.
So Senate Republicans did Donald Trump a favor by rejecting his nominee early and saying, look, one of them was mine, who I don't give a lot of credit, Mark Wayne Mullen, because he's a little too MAGA for me and just never says anything bad about Donald Trump. But he was the one that said, I will not ever confirm Matt Gaetz, because he was in the house with him where he's showing these pictures of these girls and stuff. And he's no, that is morally wrong. And I'm not going to do it.
Our politicians are probably the most corrupt people in the country. I'm telling you.
No, they are. I mean, look, everyone goes to Congress and gets rich. And I think that's absolutely a conversation we have.
How is it? Yeah. I just don't. Yeah, it just blows my mind. It's and they're well, it's not insider, but it's no, you have access to information that the rest of the public does not, which helps you make a better decision. So if that's not insider trading, I don't know what is.
It's worse than insider trading. They can regulate those industries and companies. So it's not insider trading. They can actually pull the strings. That's not just knowing what's going to happen. They can actually make something happen.
Proposed the bill to ban TikTok. As soon as he did that, he went and bought a ton of shares of Facebook.
Yep.
And then once it passed, he bought more. And I'm like, you can't tell me that's not dirty.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because you are the person making the thing happen. Like I said, that is
You're
actually
the one
pulling the
string.
Law.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every problem we have right now can be fixed by fixing Congress.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because every problem is Congress's fault, basically. Which then I go, it's really our fault because we won't fire him.
And we won't fire him. I mean, well, I think you and I probably would, but the majority, when I think everybody thinks that the president is the most powerful person in the country and that they're the ones that do everything. But in reality, and it's just like your local government, the mayor's the most powerful person. No, it's a city council. They're the ones that make the laws, and or it's Congress. They're the ones that make the laws. They're the ones that make the budget. They're the ones that truly have the power. So when you sit there and blame a president, even when I look back on Joe Biden's presidency, he had Democrats in charge almost the entire time, and they did nothing.
Yeah, but I think the reason that's happening, though, is because presidents are demanding that now, too, because
Yes.
Congress is happy to give it to them, and they're happy to take it. And
they're basically just collecting a paycheck to do nothing.
well, yeah,
You know?
or you just have to get in line. It's also bad. I mean, there's so many things wrong with Congress, but yeah, like Joe Biden's, like one of my biggest problems with Joe Biden is that, okay, if there ever was a mandate, which like I said, don't totally buy the thing that like people are like, you must do this, or like it's just like I said, it's a job interview is all it is, or a firing of the old guy and hiring of the new guy. But if Joe Biden had any kind of mandate in 2020, it was to not be Donald Trump. What they were rejecting was
Right.
Donald Trump. They weren't rejecting conservatives. We would have won the Senate if Donald Trump hadn't tanked it. So you would have had Joe Biden without a Democratic-controlled Senate, except that Donald Trump only cares about himself, and he said, I don't like Georgia right now, so don't go vote. It's rigged, because he was claiming his election was stolen, which was absolute BS. And it didn't matter. It's his ego. And so he cost Republicans the Senate, those two runoffs. And look, that changes the course of what happened under Joe Biden. It just does.
It sure does. Yep.
So if Joe Biden has a mandate, though, it is to not be Donald Trump, right? And he manages to not revoke any of the power of the executive branch, even though he knows Donald Trump might win the next election. So he does absolutely nothing to protect. Look, if democracy is really at stake, because that's the claim of the Democrats,
That's what
right?
the claim was. Yep.
If the claim was that, why wouldn't you restructure the government when you have both houses? You have the House and the Senate, and you have the White House. Why would you not restructure it to say, you know what? It's too dangerous to have one person have all this power, and I'm not doing this via an executive order. I'm demanding Congress do this. I'm sending this agency back down to Congress. I'm like, if he would have done that stuff, but you know what he did? He abused the presidential power worse than Donald Trump did. The preemptive pardons have forever changed America.
Absolutely.
Because Donald Trump's already doing them now, and then it will never stop. And I think we're going to have to take away the pardon power from the president, even though it's something that I think we do need for righting wrongs in the justice system.
I agree with you.
But that's not what it's being used for.
No. I mean, you look at January 6th and I look at this, and I come from, I've watched hours and hours of video. So what I look at that as, and I probably get you, my listeners, but it was essentially a protest that turned into somewhat of a riot. Right.
It wasn't a lot different than the Black Lives Matter riots, which 6 months before everyone had complained about. And
except for the fact they didn't burn down Congress.
They
Right.
would have if they could have.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they wanted to hang Mike Pence. I think there were some people that absolutely wanted to be violent, but it only takes us, like, the point is there's still no excuse for joining in on the violence. And there were people there that wanted to be violent and that were looking to kill someone.
And let me give you an example. I know someone in my personal life that was there on January 6th, and they did not participate in the violence. And they said the majority of the people there did not participate in the violence.
Right.
And that, so the problem that I have of it with the law enforcement.
No one ever said that with Black Lives Matter.
No one ever said that with Black Lives Matter. And I'm
that's
sure
my point.
that there were people there that wanted to be nonviolent. But it's always the violent people that we see.
Right. And the problem is, look, I don't care, because to me, if you even have 10 people that are violent in the crowd, you look back at the Tea Party, for example. Look, I think the Tea Party got taken over by grifters. I think it turned into, most of those people weren't really serious about what they were saying they were serious about. I think they just didn't like Barack Obama. And I think that's really what it boiled down to. They didn't really care about constitutionalism. Look at Mike Lee. I mean, that is such a transition to go from being Mr. Conservative and then, just doing absolutely whatever Donald Trump says and saying the executive has all this authority. I'm like, that is not what you were saying in 2010. So you look at the Tea Party, though, and they were they were like, look, we are not giving ourselves a bad name. They cut out that riffraff anytime it happened. Yep. They cleaned up everything when they would go do a big protest or kind of thing like that. Not a piece of trash left anywhere. Like they were very, even though they like, look, and I go, yes, that's exactly what you do. Look at the civil rights movement. Same thing. It's like, we are not going to be violent.
Yep.
That is not how you get the change. Like specifically, you have to be nonviolent.
Look at the cops were the ones that were violent in the civil rights era,
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And that is,
it was a different era that back then. The policing techniques were definitely different, but you're absolutely
that
right. These
is
were
what
nonviolent
won.
protesters. Yep.
But that is what won the hearts and minds of Americans in the civil rights, is that they saw that on TV and they went, they're spraying fire hoses at children that are doing nothing violent.
Just
and
stating
it changed the tide.
their opinion. Yeah. And, and now look at the opposite, right? Where we have these people, and we talked about it a little bit with the burning of the Teslas and the dealerships and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And it's so sickening to me. And it's like, listen, folks, I understand that you don't like Elon Musk. I get it. It's fine. I could totally understand where you're coming from. But to go and destroy the livelihoods of your neighbors, right, that might be working at that Tesla dealership, or maybe, because you told them that they should drive electric cars, so they bought one 2 years ago, and now you're catching it on fire, or, keying it. And it's like, listen, guys, that is not the way to protest. That is violence. That is,
violence.
Exactly like they said, it's terrorism, because it is. If you're throwing a Molotov cocktail into a Tesla vehicle, it's terrorism. I'm sorry.
The problem, though, is that the Democrats defended the Black Lives Matter violence, which they shouldn't have. What they should have said is that we are the people that marched earlier. We're with them. And then there's a bunch of people that came in and wanted to burn some buildings down and really don't.
They have nothing to do with us.
They're not even from there most of the time. They travel in to do this stuff, which, look, January 6th is the same thing. Obviously, it's a little different because it's D.C., but look, everyone traveled in to go. Some of those people traveled to be violent, and they wanted to be violent. And they've been look, I would be violent if I...
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. And that's where I was going with the Trump pardons, was I don't disagree that he should have pardoned some of them, because I think for some of the charges that I've seen for some of the people, and again, this comes from my law enforcement background, by the time Trump came in office, they have served their time. You know what I mean? And the fact that they were still in there, and there's still some people that had not faced their formal charges yet. That right there is a crime in itself. Yeah.
Well, some of that's because lawyers are delaying stuff.
Exactly.
Too. I mean, that's not entirely the Justice Department.
What he should have done, though, is he should have gone on a case-by-case basis and said, okay, this person, maybe they went in, but there was no violence, there was no this. So, okay, I'm going to pardon them because I see this.
But he's too lazy. And Joe Biden was too, because Joe Biden did the same thing with, he released a couple guys that like poured gang members that poured boiling water on people.
But
they pled down.
Yep.
They pled down to nonviolent drug offender.
Yep.
And
it was crazy.
Those people they're not out yet, but they got, I guess they didn't get pardons. They got clemency on some of that stuff.
Yeah. Their death sentence was commuted is what it was. So now their life.
No, not those ones. I'm not those.
You're
I'm
talking about the ones
I'm talking about he did a bulk nonviolent drug offender pardon.
Yes. Yep. You're right. I forgot about that.
That there are a couple names that were specifically like very violent gang members that pled down because they either didn't get witnesses that could, and so they pled them down. So it looks like on paper they're there for a nonviolent drug, but like all these other charges that are there that aren't the drug charge were either thrown up, or they weren't. Once they got them on the other charge, they didn't prosecute on the other crime. So anyway, the point was, this person is now going to be released by, I think it's 2026 or 2027. Like, who do you think they're going to, like, these were like very violent people. And
look at the same example of, what was it, one of the January 6 people that got released, and then he ended up getting shot and killed. Right.
Yep.
And I'm like, come on, folks.
Some of these people are violent, and some of them, like the Proud Boys and these kind of people that were there to absolutely, like, if you're carrying zip ties on you and you're searching for Nancy Pelosi, you are up to no good.
There.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And he let those people go. And like, I'm
with you on that. I'm 100.
Yeah.
At first when I heard January 6th, I was like, oh, good. Because he said, hey, we're going to do a case-by-case basis. And I was like,
too lazy.
I'm all right with that. And then I find out he released everybody. And I was like, and then I started doing research on some of the people that he released. And I'm like, because I was thinking, hey, I might have someone on the show, right, to see what it was like, how you're treated. And I started researching these people, and I was like, these are not really people I'd probably associate with,
Yeah, and the other thing about that,
all of them were, I'm sure that there were some people that were caught up in that probably should not have been.
There's one person that refused it, though. There's one nonviolent person that was only charged with misdemeanors and says, no, what I did was wrong. I was lied to. I believed a lie. Now, here's the thing. I would potentially be violent if I thought there was actually a stolen election.
Sure.
These people were lied to is the thing that's where I do have sympathy for them, except that I don't, because they have access to all the same information I do.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's a wrap for part 1 of this interview with Blake Fischer. We will continue with part 2. That will come on Wednesday, and you can look for that on all your platforms YouTube, and social media reels. Please join us as we continue in part 2.